So I heard that term heavy hitters, and I think that that's a really interesting term for this evening because I don't know anyone who's more of a heavy hitter than a parent. I mean, parents play every role under the sun. So when we're talking about heavy hitters, I think all of you are bringing your A game all day, every day, even if you don't feel like you are. So thank you for doing the toughest job in the world, and doing that sometimes flying blind because we don't know everything. So we really appreciate you asking us to share some of our experience. And we're hoping that some of our experience can bolster your experience or your knowledge or just make you feel a little bit more confident. So tonight what we're hoping to do, we just met a month ago, and it was great to meet another colleague that's interested and excited about this topic. And we wanted to spend the evening doing a few things, just opening the door to the conversation. Is it awkward? Maybe. Is it difficult? Probably. Is it something that you think every day, wow, I can't wait for those conversations to take place? Probably not. So we want to open the door to getting some muscle memory about these topics, thinking about them, creating some internal dialogues about them, creating some external dialogues with others about them. We want to be comfortable. We want to feel like we have power when we're having these conversations, and we hope we can support you in doing that a bit more maybe than yesterday felt like to you. And we also want to talk about building safety in relationships. How do we create safe space so any conversation is a conversation that we can have?
Very true. I always think I've had the opportunity over the years to be able to talk to parents all across this country. And I always like to share a funny story that at least I still think is funny and makes me kind of crack up about when I had to have this conversation when the birds and bees were talked about with my dad, who is a retired Presbyterian minister, so that's probably the last person that you want to have sit down. So he didn't want to talk to me about it either. And he took me to Forbes Regional Hospital on a Saturday morning where he sat me down in a room like this when I was 12 years old. And it was having somebody else, like a nurse, have a conversation about these particular pieces. But I had to sit next to my dad. And the only two things I remember from that entire conversation was that when I first walked in there was a kid from my school. And I was going to have to explain this on Monday what we were doing here. And the other thing is they passed around a claymation scrotum sac that they wanted us to feel if there was any lumps on the testicles, and I had to hand that to my dad. So those were the only two things that I remember from this kind of conversation on how uncomfortable it can be. And I'm neurotypically developing, but my sister is not. She has autism. And so she's a year and a half younger than me. And growing up as a sibling is also a very trying job sometimes, especially when you're out dating. And when I was a junior, she was a freshman, and I was dating Kelly, and she had questions. And she didn't know what went on behind closed doors. And I mean that literally and figuratively. And so she understood from one moment that I was just friends with Kelly, and the next moment I started calling her my girlfriend. And I think that those are the kind of conversations that we've had over the last month about trying to have you see from our perspective as some maybe more familiar with these terms of disability, but also from my perspective too, as being the brother of someone who now is 45 years old, lives with her boyfriend Mike in the wonderful city of Boise, Idaho. So if you think services are bad in Pittsburgh, move to Boise, Idaho. And she's also going to celebrate her son's 4th birthday in 3 weeks. So it makes it very nerve-wracking for me, 2,500 miles away, with my sister who did adult things because she is an adult. And we can do these things to help our individuals stay safe as they're getting older.
And Robert, could you tell the group a little bit more about yourself professionally?
Yeah, so I work for Wesley Family Services. I'm many hats there. I'm a school counselor there. I work in our Wesley schools. I also am a contributing editor to our Healthy Relationships curriculum, which we designed about 15 years ago. It's a group of us that knew that we were missing and things were slipping through the cracks, that we were just not having these conversations. And we wanted to make sure that our students, as they were leaving, were prepared for what it looked like when the bus stopped coming. And so for that particular time, we wrote that for 4 years, along with some of my other colleagues. We published it in 2015, and excited that we're in 42 states, being able to share this curriculum. We estimate about 165,000 individuals are affected every year by learning more about this in a meaningful and very objective sort of way, so that they can feel safe as they move to that next step of their own lives as well. And as you heard, my sister Amy is a great addition to our family and to my life, and it's just been fun to kind of see her a bit as she's grown older as well too. How about you?
So I'm Adrienne. I am a member of the branch board. I am an MSW, LSW, licensed here in the state of Pennsylvania. I've had a very interesting career path. My most recent certification is as an aging in place specialist. All day, every day, I work on compliance and home modifications. So why would someone want me to come and talk about this topic? Well, I have an interesting childhood experience of being a child who, until I was 8 years old, was in a hospital more than I was anywhere else. And when you're hospitalized as a child because you have a physical disability, which I did, and still do, it's managed now in a way that most people wouldn't know that it exists. But you get really used to people touching you all the time and everywhere, and there is no such thing as intimacy or boundaries because people are just on top of you all the time in all of the places and everything that you do. So through that childhood experience, I really struggled with boundaries. I also struggled with my family. I grew up in a small town, and these are topics we didn't talk about. So when I was in the 5th grade, I saw a film strip where daisies were talking about getting their period. And I have to tell you, that was bizarre and disconcerting on a variety of levels. And as a precocious child, which I was, because I grew up around a lot of adults as a child with serious and persistent illness, I decided to go to Walton Books and buy some books about menstruation. Well, in that section, there were other books. And I always had money from people who give it to you on holidays. So I walked in with my cash to Walton's Books, and I bought some books. Probably some books that they didn't want to sell me, probably some books that my parents were uncomfortable with me having. But I went to Walton Books back when there was Walton Books, and I bought all the things because the film strip was not enough. Through that personal experience, I have become a person that does not see anything from a sexual standpoint as being atypical because I read all the books very early on. And there aren't things that are really atypical. There are just different ways that people express themselves. I also don't find anything to be awkward. Things are just not awkward to me as a person. There's nothing I'm uncomfortable talking about. So Becky can attest, my clients are very open about their lives. They tell me everything because there is no awkward. And what we would love to do for you is get you to a place where there is no awkward. There is just conversation. There's just conversation about experience. There's good questions. Those questions come from a real place, and that we want to be ready. The content might not be something we know or feel completely comfortable with, but we can get into that nice place where our shoulders are down and we feel approachable, and we also feel confident. So a little bit of what we would like to talk about is absorbing the difference between our dreams and expectations and our realities. Robert shared this wonderful experience of having a sibling with autism. That's not what we always expect. So in our thinking, when we're either having a child, raising our children, being a sibling, is we have expectations. And sometimes the expectations we have don't turn into the realities of our situations. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. It's something we should embrace and understand. and give ourselves grace. That just because our expectation isn't becoming our reality, that doesn't mean that our reality isn't good, isn't robust, isn't vibrant, isn't going to lead us to those powerful relationships that we have dreamed of. They just might look a little different. So what we hope to do tonight is give ourselves a little bit more awareness of how we respond, how people in front of us see us responding, thinking a little bit about our fears and how we can manage those, thinking about our values and culture and how that will impact our discussions, how that will be something that we need to prepare for. Our belief systems are deeply held, and there will be times where maybe someone's questions or behaviors don't align perfectly, and getting ourselves ready for those conversations. So we're ready to kick off, and we want to make sure that all of you feel comfortable, and you know that this is interactional. So at any time when you want to dive deeper, ask questions, give examples, we want you to do that. So we're going to set the stage. Things we want you to have in mind is that all times are good times. Naturally occurring opportunities for conversations are exactly the time that you should start that conversation. You might not finish it in that moment, but the time it presents itself is always a good time. And it's an opportunity for us to walk down that road. We want to be in the moment, but also give us some space that we can revisit topics. So we're present, but we might need to step away. Media is your friend. If you are not a Googler, get to be a Googler. Even if you want to use a different search engine, anything you want to know, anything you want to talk about is online. You can find support in a way that might not just come naturally to you. So think about that media. You don't have to always be able to create the conversation yourself. You could use other people's tips and tricks. Try to remain neutral and think about neutral space. So for our family group tonight, is this a neutral space for you? Does it feel safe? That's exactly what you'd want, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you feel like having a conversation in someone's bedroom is safe space?
Yes.
Yes, for you it is. Is yes the answer for everyone? Oh, I see some no's. I see some head shaking. Maybe not. You're really being cognizant of what is this space? Does it have neutrality? Does it feel safe to you? Leave room for questions. Everything isn't a yes, no. Think about being open-ended. Let people tell you the thing that they're thinking about in their language, in their time, without that limitation of it has to be one thing or another. Be honest about what you know and don't know, and be honest if you're not feeling comfortable. It's okay to say, wow, I don't know. And not knowing makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. I'm going to step away from this in this moment. It's okay not to be perfect, even though sometimes we really try. Not being perfect is being human. Judgment-free. Anyone in the room feel like they're judgment-free? If you do, raise your hand. We probably aren't judgment-free, but trying to get close. Again, perfection,
Yes.
no. You're judgment-free? Oh, that's great. So we have a participant in tonight's meeting that's going to help us get closer to judgment-free. Remember, there's no normal. Anyone in the room ever had a conversation with someone else who's talking about something normal and feel like, that's not my normal. I didn't grow up that way. I don't think that. That's true, there is no normal. It's what works for you and your family in the context of your lives and your beliefs and your culture. Be sure that you're knowledgeable to the extent you can be, but don't overdo it. The internet is a rabbit hole. You can pull up 50,000 documents on a topic. When you're in a natural space with someone, 50,000 reference materials doesn't help. We want to know the basics and we want to know them well, but we don't need to get stuck in that quagmire of detail. And something we want to set the tone with is there's not just one type of sex or sexual activity or sexual partner. So being open to what that spectrum could be is important.
I think some of the stuff when we think about setting the stage is that I had a situation several years ago where we had a sixth grader that her mom was a single mom, had two young sons at home too. So the daughter was the youngest of the three, and she went through puberty. And the mom was stressed out, and she had two sons she was raising. She was by herself, and she needed some help with getting her daughter to be safe through menstruation. And so it was that time, and she came to us, and she goes, "Can you please help me?" And I said, "Sure, we can work together as a team with you and really kind of following some of your lead as well too." A motto that we have at Wesley is that if you're capable of physically being able to take care of yourself, we're going to do everything in our power to have that happen, because we really want to make sure that we have the opportunity that other people can't interfere or harm. And so it took us 3.5 years. The girl we were working with was relatively severely delayed, but she was able to take care of herself. She could count to 4. She loved to draw. So we were able to get her a calendar, and she could make a calendar, and she could draw on that day of the month and other days of the month, that we could get to the actual pieces that she could start to feel when things were changing with her body, so that she could go and prepare herself to be able to be ready for that time, and then to learn to change her path. 3.5 years. A motto that we have that I've lived off of my entire life is inch by inch, life is a cinch, yard by yard, it's very hard. And so if we have the opportunity to really take time and work on the things that will be the best to keep our individuals safe, then we can then add on to those once we were able to capture those particular pieces. And so 3.5 years our team worked, and we were successful. As far as I know, she's probably 28, 29 years old now. Most likely is living with some supportive housing, group home, some sort of other assistance out there, but I bet you any money she's taking care of herself when it comes to that time of the month. So we did take off some time from going into any more in-depth information when it comes to talking about body parts or other health-related things. And I then was able, when she was a junior, to be her counselor, and I went to mom and I said, "We're going to bring back some of this health stuff. I'd like to talk about some body parts and some other things about how babies are made." And that mom was like, "I think we got through the tough stuff with the menstruation cycle. I don't think we really need to worry about anything else." And I said, I understand, but I do think for her safety, I'd like to talk to her about those other things. And that mom was like, "Yeah, okay. But in our house, we call those things a cookie and a hot dog, so that's what she'll know they are. So please continue to use those words." And I said to mom, I said, "I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to call it a penis and vagina because that's what it's called." And that mom's like, "My daughter's not taking your class." And I said, "You're welcome to opt her out. That's fine if you'd like to do that. But do you mind if I share with you why I think it's so important that I share those 2 words with your daughter?" And the mom paused. She did roll her eyes at me, and she goes, "Sure, go ahead." And I said, "Rarely does a day go by in this school where I'm just sitting around waiting for somebody to come and ask me to do something. Typically, I am always busy." And so imagine your daughter comes up to me and says, "John just grabbed my cookie," and I have no idea what that means to your daughter. I might say, "I know we can't keep John's hands to himself. We've been really trying on that. I'm almost done with this. As soon as I'm finished with it, a couple minutes, I'll go find John. We'll try to keep his hands to himself next time. I'm really sorry that happened." And then I forgot to do it. On my way home, I'm like, "Oh man, I meant to talk to John. I'll just talk to him tomorrow. What's the difference?" Imagine what it would look like if your daughter came to me and said, "John just grabbed my vagina." Don't you think I'm going to stop everything I'm doing, not only to make sure that your daughter is okay, but everybody else is okay as well? So for the rest of your daughter's life, you have to make sure that every professional that she comes in contact with understands what a cookie and a hot dog represent to your daughter. Because we already have situations here at our school where your daughter will go up to other colleagues of mine that are fantastic colleagues. They just don't know your daughter at all. So they come find us and we make it better. What was that? Yeah.
Ridiculous mom.
I think an anxious mom was the way I looked at it for sure. And so I said to the mom that for the rest of your daughter's life, you just have to make sure, because let's just fast forward until she's 34 years old and she's at a group home, supportive home, or respite. I don't know where she's at, but you're not there. And she thinks that she can trust the case manager of another client, and that case manager walks in and your daughter stops her and says, hey, I've been here for a few weeks and they say I could make some good friends if I share my cookie at night. What do you think? And that case manager doesn't know what she's about to say, but she goes, a good way to make friends is by sharing, and leaves. And that mom put her head down, and her daughter was significantly delayed. And I said, I know this stuff is tough. But the reason that I like to do what I do for a living, and I try to get others to understand as well too, is because what I want to do is help keep your loved ones and your kids safe as they're getting older. And that's the whole driving point about why we're here to talk more about this today. But those words are challenging and sometimes can be uncomfortable. But there may be a time that they need to be used so the person can intervene right away.
So we sort of have set the stage. So we'd like to ask you a few questions. How many folks in the room have talked about bodies, sexuality, sexual feelings, sexual relationships? And it's okay if you have or haven't.
Yes.
Great. That's wonderful. How many folks just haven't really talked about it yet? That's okay too. How many folks have talked about it, but also feel like you might not be prepared for the next part of the conversation? So I saw some smiles. I'll take that as some hands raised. So we're going to be in that spectrum. And wherever you are is wherever you are. So thinking about where you are right now, why did you come to this session? Why did folks in this group raise the topic of wanting to have this conversation? If someone's comfortable with sharing, why? Why did you want to have this conversation?
I have a list of questions for you.
Perfect.
About bringing it to the level of the person I'm working with. I wanted to put my son in the healthy relationships group, but I felt it was too many hours, too much for the year, or I wasn't sure if he would handle it, not attend that long.
Sure.
So I'm looking for ways to maybe do it myself, or get the curriculum, or find a way to become a virtual instance of it, or the best way to bring it down to someone's level who's not able to process like hours of it or whatever the program is. Potentially.
So we have a list of questions. That's a great reason to be here. Any other reasons why we're here?
I need help.
I need help, safety. Those are very real things.
I think that for those of us parents that are raising children into adulthood, that we have so many different things to do, and the relationships and the sexuality and the gender expression is like the icing on the cake. It's like it's out there. It's not in your day-to-day work or what you're interacting about, but it's there. And I feel as a parent, any insights I can have is going to be really helpful. And I think that with my son here, that where I have found I've gotten to a point where we've talked about things, but I'm not really sure how to go beyond it.
Mm-hmm.
And try to bring in somebody else who's more capable of talking about it. And that goes back to my children's hospital that they used to have these great sexuality classes for children with special needs, and they would start them at like 5th grade. Does anyone remember that when they did that? Mark went to that when he was that age, and the teachers of those classes, they would like sort of, they're talking to the parents like, sexuality begins when you're a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so those of you that are here and you're thinking like, I'm going to have to talk about this when my daughter has her first period or whatever, you don't understand that you're already supposed to be having a conversation. So you all that study this is really, really helpful to me.
Thank you. So I heard insight, answers to questions. I just want some help. Those are all things that we think we can help you with. So for those of us who either have not had conversations or want to dive deeper, let's talk about preparing. So when we think about preparing, just base. We have bodies, and those bodies do things. Some things that we realize they do very early on, and some things that we learn later that they do. They go through changes. So knowing our bodies is really important. It's a really important place for all of us, including many adults who are neurotypical. So if you have any interest in this whatsoever, 14% of American adults cannot identify their reproductive and sexual organs correctly. Sorry, 86% cannot identify them. Only 14% actually know them. I did the little reverse there. So only 14% of American adults can do that. So we have done something wrong as a culture.
I think when we were writing the healthy relationships curriculum, there's a test on there that's a visual of a vagina and a penis, and we didn't have the answer key. And I took it around to all the male staff members at our school to identify the female anatomy, and not one of us got it right, including myself. So it's very true.
So we just don't know. So how do we get to know? What are some resources we can use to get to know our bodies? That's each one of us. How do we get to know our body so we can then have comfortable conversations about someone else's body? Right? So when I was a kid, I loved the encyclopedia. Looked at it all the time. Does that really give you a good education on the things? It doesn't. It was great. There were overlaid pages and they were clear and you could see the fallopian tubes, and that was not what a person in real life was ever going to look like. I was never going to see anyone's fallopian tubes, no matter how long I live. So that was not helpful. So you need to understand it. And I have to go back to the power of Google. You have to be careful when you're Googling because you might get things that you don't want to get. So make your searches very specific, and you can add this scientific on them, but actually knowing, what does your body look like? What do the things about your body do? I think we're good at helping children understand your lungs. You're running and your lungs help you breathe. Well, we don't talk about what does your uterus do. And our uteruses are weird. They're confusing. They're not linear. It's not easy to explain, why do you have a uterus? And why does your uterus get rid of itself at a specific time of the month? What is that for? What is the purpose? Those things are confusing. So we heard that question. How do we explain our bodies using language that is appropriate? Robert, I know you do this all the time.
Yeah, so we always really recommend is that what is it that the individual that you're working with needs to know right now for safety? So start there. I think far too often we just are trying to go through this as quickly as we possibly can. I go back to the story about 3.5 years to help Samantha learn how to take care of herself during her menstruation cycle. That was the rate that we had to work with her. Now, every individual is going to be different, so you will know your son best, and the others in the room will know your kids. Listening, pausing, as she's already mentioned as well too. We really think that short and sweet is really the way to go. So we always like to share that it'll be objective, factual, and narrow. I've seen far too often people just over-explain and explain because you find yourself in your anxiety yourself, that you almost catch yourself that you can't believe you're having this conversation and you're talking and you just can't stop. And you're losing that momentum of what they're trying to answer. Listen for the question. That's a really important thing. What is the question that your child is asking? And maybe even pause to repeat that question back into your head, because you need to answer the question that you're being asked. Far too often, we're kind of taken back by that question. And I don't know if I'm ready, but I need to say something. And so I've seen often that individuals, not just parents, but also professionals, answer a different question that was not asked. So basically at that point, you've now given an answer that is wrong to the question that was asked. And so that objective and factual is important, but the narrow piece, and take breaks. The piece that we really pay a lot of attention to as well, as I was joking with you about this yesterday, is that you're not going to know the answer to some of the questions. And that's very true. I'm 46 years old. Kids ask me at the high school things. I have absolutely no idea what we're talking about anymore. I try to stay on TikTok and try to keep up with this stuff. It's impossible. And so I think that if you don't know an answer, say you don't know, and you're going to get back to it. You're going to go and find what that answer happens to be. But short and sweet is absolutely, I think, the best way to go when it comes to these particular things. And then give yourself the grace to be able to have that opportunity to continue to talk at some other point. You can take a break too. You can share that back. Okay, I think we've had enough about this. I bet you have more questions. So why don't we come back and ask me more questions tomorrow? Give a break from it, because you're also overwhelming sometimes with too many answers at one time as well too. And they may need to process it. I've worked with many kids over the years that take a while to process information. And if I try to speed them through it too quickly, then they're not going to be able to absorb and retain what I'm even talking about to begin with.
And I think it's also the practice what you're going to say. I am a big fan, and lots of people don't do this. Write down your thoughts and then say them out loud. Listen to yourself saying them. When they become uncomfortable, you will stammer when you're saying it because you're just not there yet. I will repeat my thinking about what I want to say over and over again out loud, just so that I have established the muscle memory to say it without that anxiety, but also that I know where I'm getting tripped up because I'm doing it verbally. And then I can also connect it back to my feeling. So I know, oh, right here's the moment when I have to say, this is a penis, and this is what a penis does. I don't have any problem saying penis out loud. But there are other words that I do have a problem saying out loud. And I know what they are, and I know what they're triggering inside me. It might be shame, it might be embarrassment, it might be anxiety, it might just be that I remember as a kid that was a word you were never allowed to say, and so I feel like when I'm trying to say it, something's holding me back. So the saying out loud is something I do all the time, and I suggest it to all my staff as well, of say it. Think about it, write it down, say it. Say it until when you're saying it, it feels just fine. You might still have a little bit of stuff, but you feel like, oh, I got through that. I don't have to hold my breath. I don't have to keep my hands clenched. I'm not sitting forward with my eyes wide open. I am in a place where I can just say it.
Yeah. I mean, being open to this conversation and also taking that time to say it out loud. If you get asked a question and you're not quite sure exactly how you want to answer it, I often will say, that's a great question. We call things questions for next time. We have a little place that I put them. And then I will either do those questions for next time for several reasons, one of which to find the answer because I just don't know what it is. The other is that I want to rehearse it myself. I need to think about what's the shortest, most narrow way that I could maybe be able to say this back. That this individual will understand my language choices as well too. These are big words in some cases, but penis and vagina is what it's called, and I can't make another term for that. If I had an individual that was relatively severely delayed, I might not go into details about fallopian tubes and all of those particular pieces, but I want to go into what the safety pieces would be. And those would be the parts that most likely could be violated by somebody else, that they could then be able to share with any other person what just happened to them, and that person will know the language that they're saying. So I really do try to stay in that a lot as well.
And we talked quite a bit about also symptoms. So if you are in a place where there could be a medical condition, also helping someone to articulate that. So if you're having something like a discharge from a specific place, wanting to be able to talk about that because that's also health related. And in those kind of terms, also talking to people about what is public and what is private. Because we might feel like talking about our penis in the safety of our home is absolutely the right thing to do. But going to school and talking to another child in your class about your penis might not be the appropriate thing to do. So we also want to, when we're having those conversations, set the tempo of what is public, what is private, what is public for other people to be involved in, and what is private for other people not to be involved in. Back to your example of someone touching your cookie. Someone else touching your cookie in this context isn't something that should be happening.
Yeah, I think often, and for me, this conversation and making sure that we're being factual and objective and narrow with talking to individuals about body parts and other sexually related things isn't very important. But I think one piece that I see that we overlook so often is this opportunity to talk about what private is and what public is. Think about the difference, and I don't know exactly how you had mentioned where those things were called that we could go use over here at the beginning if we need to relieve ourselves, but we probably interchange that word restroom and bathroom like it means nothing. For our individuals that we work with, if we say that it's okay to do a certain behavior in a bathroom with the door closed by yourself, are we surprised when they do that by themselves in a family restroom at the mall? The door's closed, they're by themselves. We said they could do that in a bathroom if they were alone. So it's a big deal at our school to say the word restroom for every other place other than your home bathroom. Because the bathroom at home might be a place that's private. Every other restroom out there in the world is not private, even if you are alone. Because some of the individuals we work with are so literal in their processing, and we're trying to help, but sometimes our own words trip us up in that helping mechanism. So I know it's a lot to think about, but that public versus private I've seen over the years has been one of the areas that the population that I've worked with has really struggled. If they think they can't be seen, they're private. And that is usually just another situation. Recently, we had somebody that had blinds similar to the ones in the back that were not pulled the whole way down. Where their eyesight was with the blinds, they couldn't see the eyes of the people walking past, but the blinds were up high enough to see everything below the waist. But they thought they were in a private room because they couldn't have eye contact with someone else. So again, really trying to lean in on what a private place is and what a public place is, but also allowing there to be a private place in your home for your child to be able to do certain things that's private for them, as long as they're not injuring themselves or harming themselves. They want, because if they're not able to find that safe private place at home, they're going to try to find a private place somewhere else that most likely is going to be public, even if it is in a more secured place as well too. And
Are you alluding to masturbation?
in that case, yes, but also private and public in general about a lot of other situations as well too. Like where you can talk about certain things like penises and vaginas. We're not going to say that in the classroom. That's a more public place that we can talk about that. So.
And to your point, touch. Touch is also a big part of this. What is healthy and positive touch? We may not always be comfortable with someone touching themselves, but biologically that is healthy touch. So thinking about what is positive and healthy touch and being able to have those conversations as well. Not only where that touch might occur in a space like this or on your body or in a different kind of relationship that you might be having with different people. For me as a child, people touched everything I had, and that was what you did because you were a good patient. You don't complain, you don't get nervous, you don't ask somebody not to do that. You just let them do what they're going to do. I can share in this group publicly that I was sexually assaulted by a medical provider in my youth. I suspect that may not have happened if I wasn't such a good patient. So what is healthy touch? For different people, it is different things. For your child, touching may be triggering. It may be triggering in many negative ways. So healthy touch for them may look different because when they're touched, that reaction is negative. Maybe physiologically, they're experiencing it in a way that they do not enjoy. You will hear parents say, "Oh, hug your aunt." For some children, that is really traumatizing. Being told you have to touch someone, being told you have to let someone touch you. We have to be able to establish our own boundaries. Becky can attest to this. I am a person that don't hug me. I can tolerate it, but tolerate is a strong word. And thinking about what tolerating means. I don't like people touching me, especially if you try to hug me when I can't see you. Those things are things that we want to talk about. What is healthy, positive touch? Who gives it to you? Where are you touched on your body? How are you touched? And where does that take place? What are the settings that are okay?
I fall in that same line of not like like hugs, like Christmas time, like but I do it. I mean, stop hugging me.
Because when you
But,
do that, people
yeah,
think
right.
you're strange.
One other thing that I was thinking as you were talking is that I guess I don't know if I thought my sister could have a baby. I didn't know. I mean, not that maybe my parents looked into it and knew she was able to have a baby. I don't know, but Amy didn't like guys until she was about 31 or 32. So the other piece that I've seen over the years is that there's a number of kids that graduate from Wesley schools that have absolutely no interest in dating when they're 21 that they've stayed on their IEP track where they bank their diploma. No interest. But I've run into those families later, or I've talked to the kids later or something, and somewhere between the ages of 26 and 31, a lot of times individuals are more interested in becoming more intimately with someone else. So if your child is at the age where you think that they would be more interested in dating and they haven't come across that yet, that does not mean it's not ever going to happen. And I think it's a really good opportunity at those ages when the hormones are still going at 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 to still have these conversations. Because if you're open to having these conversations at that younger age, then there's a better chance that they're more open to come to you when they start feeling something, like the butterflies in their stomach about when they see a girl or a boy and they like how that person's treating them and they have an opportunity to feel that they trust you to come to you to talk to you. And so I strongly always try to tell schools that we're in across the country is that even if you have students that are up to the age that they age out of the school, they're still not showing interest in dating or any of these things, please still have a conversation. Because we can't guarantee that it will never be like that. Because my sister was 31, and quite frankly, I was more concerned about Amy having a child at the age of 41 than I was concerned about her having a child because she had autism. I thought her age might be more of an issue at that age, based on she wasn't overly healthy. And so far, I mean, Ellie does have some learning disabilities, but nothing, and she's doing the best job she can do. And I tell her that often. It's the other piece as well, too. Be proud of the questions that you get asked and thank them for asking you the question because then you're able to open the door for there to be more as well.
And part of what you're referring to is also, we're going to have different stages in our bodies. There will be stages where hormones are more active or less active. Our bodies are going to be maturing in different ways. So really being able to talk through those changes in our bodies. Is our child feeling like they can talk to us about what might be changing? Especially for children who you may still be bathing or grooming or dressing. Making sure that they feel comfortable with the way you're touching them as their bodies change. Do we have those conversations? Do we ask? Do we give folks that information of your chest is going to swell? If you are a child that doesn't realize when you have certain levels of hormones, your chest is going to change drastically, and it can happen quickly. For those of you who were quick bloomers, it happens fast. Imagine just waking up one day and thinking there's something wrong, that I looked like this yesterday and today I look like this. So how might my body change? Being able to do, again, that objective, factual, and narrow, our chests will swell. Our penises will change. We may be having things like erections that we didn't experience before. Again, imagine having something like that happen that you are not aware could happen. We're taught that those kind of changes in our body would be problematic. Suddenly your body looks completely different than it did. Suddenly you're feeling a different sensation. So making sure that people understand your body will change and that change is natural and normal and we can talk about it. Also, our boundaries change as our bodies change. Things that we may do when we're toddlers, the way we might interact with the world is different. as our bodies change, our boundaries are also going to change. And helping establish well, now that your chest is swollen, when someone touches your chest, it feels different. And it's okay to establish a new boundary. That was also something that was really hard for me as I developed, because people were always touching, especially my rib cage. Well, now I have breasts. And that feels completely different now that we're having touches. And how comfortable am I with that? And why am I now feeling something different? I don't want you to do that anymore. I actually don't want a male doctor at this point. I would like to have a female doctor. Being able to just talk openly about those changes and how they change how we're acting, and that it's our body and we can say, what? No. I can now, as I should have always been able to, say no. No, I'm not comfortable with that. And how do we feel as a parent and a caretaker when we hear no? Are we okay with no? Do we understand where no is coming from? Have we gotten to that place where maybe no stings, but we can use that sting in our building of our relationship with our child and us helping them establish their boundaries with other people?
Yeah, I think understanding where the no is coming from is really important there. Is that to take a moment to think about that. And that might mean you need to walk away and give them that space, as long as they're not in this moment of hurting themselves as well too. But many of the individuals we work with over the years have a model behavior they see most frequently. And the behavior that they see most frequently are the ones that they see most frequently. And so my sister was able to watch me so often have my own privacy, my own personal space, and me be able to say no. And my parents respected that. And Amy came along, and she was, there was some risk for concern for her safety and her health. I remember we had to take her bedroom door off because she would go lock and barricade herself in there, and she could injure herself. So one of the best ways, and I suggest this to parents all the time, if your kid's young enough, take the door off, because that's the barrier that's getting there. But when the student or when your child or a child starts showing that they don't have those same self-injurious harm cases anymore, start to give back their privacy. And so Amy didn't get her door back on until she was 18. And not because we shouldn't have put it back on earlier, we just didn't think about it, because it just became standard in the house. And so I think that Amy really lacked that privacy piece, but no fault of the family or of ourselves. It was just that we were so caught up. To your point about icing on the cake, I think that was there's so many other things that we're worried about, that how do we get to this particular piece to tackle and cover this? And that's by being an open ability for them to ask questions, but also to put boundaries on those questions in the sense of how much I'm going to say in one setting. You don't have to finish it all in one night. You can have this conversation over time as well. And talk to the other individuals that you trust, that your child also trusts, because they may be able to give you some insight. We here at the school, I often think this, it took me a while to realize this, is that I overhear conversations that kids have that their parents are not hearing at home. And even with students that have absolutely broken filters and you think that they say everything anywhere, it doesn't matter. We've learned over the years that those individuals know what they can and can't say around their parents, just like we did, because they're teenagers and they're learning some of those things as well too. I was guilty of telling my sister what she shouldn't say around my dad and my mom, because I didn't want her to get in trouble. And so, but then no one was hearing that Amy was interested in some of these things, so we didn't think it was something we needed to talk about. So I think that's another piece as well too. Be open to what others that you trust that are close to your child are telling you that they're seeing or hearing, and then stop and think about how to address those things in a very short, narrow, and factual sort of way.
And I love that you used the term there, getting in trouble. One of the things that happens, and we don't do this intentionally, is our children get in trouble because of something that they did. Well, the something that they did could be really natural, and our gut response to that could be negative. And being able to say, okay, I remember as a child, one of the things that children would get in trouble for was touching themselves. Well, people touch themselves, whether we like that, don't like that, or comfortable or not comfortable. People will touch themselves. Our bodies are designed to give us pleasure from certain things. And people learn that. They learn it early. So the getting in trouble from exploring your body, maybe we need to practice. Maybe that's one of the things we need to practice on, our responses of saying out loud of, it's okay to touch our bodies. But there are some parameters around that of where and how. And are we doing something that could injure ourselves, could give us an infection, could cause a cut or a bruise? Some folks, because of just their physical nature, some folks just are not as successful with self-pleasuring and can do some harm. So you're not in trouble, but let's explore positive things around if we are touching ourselves. These are ways that we can do that in a healthy way, in a safe way, where it is private and where we are really understanding that there are consequences, also sometimes consequences that we wouldn't have thought about.
And I think that the idea about the getting in trouble, it's not the act that caused the trouble, it's the place that caused the trouble. And keep that part in mind. It's that you just need to redirect. We had a family one time that they knew it was time. Their son pleasured himself between 4 and 4:30 almost every single day. That was the time that they lined up for that to happen. And he went and put on a Superman's onesie. And I just have this vision as he kept getting taller and bigger that this onesie was ripping. But they had this time frame that they did, and that was good. That was worked well for the family. But I did sit with the parents in a parent meeting and said, I know that this is what you're doing. I give you all the kudos in the world that you're allowing your son that opportunity for a half hour. But we're going to need to start moving away from such a rigid time frame and such a rigid outfit. Because I have this vision that he may be able to move into an area where maybe he'd start dating a girl or a guy or something, and then he would think that those things had to happen between 4 and 4:30. And if it couldn't happen between 4 and 4:30, well, I'm going to make it happen between 4 and 4:30. And that's where they get in trouble, because it's more about the place where it's being done than the act that's being done. And I think if you can focus on the fact of redirecting the place, you have a much better opportunity to keep your kids safe.
And the how. Things like hot dogs are not sanitary. And we have all heard, the urban legends of hot dogs or different things of that nature, or a piece of a vegetable of some sort. Those are things that people do. They've become urban legends because people do that. So making sure that somebody understands that there is a sanitary component. One of the clients that Becky and I served used cooking grease as a lubricant. Now, it is a lubricant, but not a lubricant that one should have internally, especially once food has been cooked in it, and they were using used cooking oil. So that is something that really could have a consequence that you would never think of. But it's our job to think of the thing that we would never think of. So when we're opening our minds and having our awkward conversations with ourselves and practicing out loud, there are things that people do that we may want to be ready for. And sanitation is a big part of masturbation. It is a place where people do end up with consequences that are quite negative. The other item is what you're using. Sometimes people think anything will go into an orifice, and it won't. So we want to make sure that if people are going to be using instruments, that we've been able to have a conversation about that. I know that feels very awkward, but there are things that are produced that are safe and hygienic that people can use that are much better than the alternatives. And one of the really nice things about the internet is, again, you can shop. You can shop in categories, and you can shop in a way once you've prepared yourself, so that someone could make a choice of, I think that would work for me or my needs. And as awkward as that is, it's much better to have that awkward conversation than the awkward hot dog conversation or the awkward zucchini conversation. So getting ourselves, if you've never been on one of those sites, they aren't all disgusting. Some of them are very nicely laid out. They're not particularly explicit. There are reputable companies that make these products. One that I would highly recommend that folks take a look at is a company called Dame, D-A-M-E. They specialize in female products. They are women-owned and operated. They were the first sexual device company to be fully funded by a crowdsourced campaign. These are engineers that really wanted to look at how could women be safe. So it is a reputable company, and it may be the kind of company that it's a little easier to explore their products than, some others that people have heard about throughout their lives.
Another site that I find to be able to help supplement these conversations, because let's just be honest, there's anxiety behind this, and I recognize that. Often when I work with families and talk to parents, I stop and say, just take a breath. This is tough. And that is tough.
Shake it out.
Yeah.
Remember from your childhood, you can shake it out.
There's a site called amaze.org. It's amaze.org. It's free. It's cartoon based, but we have found it to be very, very helpful to be able to help supplement what you're trying to talk about in a more visual way that is relatively PG-13. And I think that it has been, the other piece about it is there's all kinds of different scenarios on there. I mean, there's one on there about choosing between boxers versus briefs. I mean, they do go through some really good conversation. There's other things you probably get on there and be like, hey, God, we are not covering this yet. And that's fine as well, too, because some other family might need to be covering that particular topic. But just as I mentioned about objective, factual, and narrow, some of these clips are relatively long, maybe 4 minutes. Just find the 36 seconds that you need to use. There's one clip that they're talking about the cartoon bear is helping with something. I find the cartoon bear to be distracting. I want to go right to the part that I actually am really discussing with my client or student with, and they have found it and they want to watch it again. I'm like, yep, let's watch that part one more time. And so that piece has helped me those videos have helped me have some supplemental information that isn't me directly talking to them, but it's allowing space for them to learn. And so it's kind of working together as a team through some multimedia piece that helps be able to really cement, because retention can be really challenging here. And confusion is really something that we have to be cautious of. And it's not black and white when it comes to how we really work with our clients that we are working with. So I think it's important to be open, but also know that there are some resources out there that are free. And watch the videos yourself first. Some of them are kind of comical, but I think you could find some strong uses of them to help drive the point so mom and dad aren't always the ones driving the point.
And I know we're getting close, but something that we haven't talked about yet is sex with partners. Sex with partners takes the conversation to another level. Your child at some point may or may not want to have sex with a partner. That may be any type of partner. And being able to talk openly about that means that we do have to talk about it, and we should talk often, especially when there's a contextual space where we can talk about it. Maybe we've noticed that they seem to be excited or interested in another person. Maybe we go to this class regularly and we've noticed there seems to be some kind of chemistry or interest here. Contextually starting to have the conversation of, I notice that you seem to like this person. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that? When you think about this person, do you think about different things you might like to do with this person? Do you think about ways that you would like to engage them? Have you ever thought about touching them or kissing them or hugging them and being able to talk through what is that feeling? What is appropriate to do? What are the boundaries another person would have? We have our relationship with ourselves, but when we start to bring another person in, we might want to start talking about our family's values and expectations. We don't want to limit opportunities, but we do have a context of our lives and what we believe in our cultures, and being able to talk about how culturally, how our family looks at relationships, what our expectations might be, what it means to be in a relationship with someone. How are we defining that? What are your expectations? How would you talk to the other person about those expectations? How would you ask their permission to do some of the things you might like to do, like touch them, or kiss them, or hug them? How do we as humans communicate that? We've all had those awkward moments, no matter what our abilities are, of not gauging someone else's feelings or viewpoint correctly. We do have to ask questions. They might feel awkward, they might be scary, but we do have to gauge what the other person is thinking. We have to remind ourselves that we have to respect boundaries, and someone might be giving us signals that aren't clear. So how do we even practice those signals? So you may have the experience where another person backs away from you. What is that meaning? You may lean in to kiss someone and they may put their hand up. What is the meaning of that? Contextually, we've all probably misinterpreted someone else's cues. So it's not like this is a perfect science, but practicing some of those scenarios of you tried to touch her and she pulled away. There's a meaning behind that. How do we talk about that? How do we talk about the decisions that our child is making? Maybe the person that they have interest in, we think is harmful. We think might be dangerous. How do we talk about that? These are some things I've seen. These are some behaviors that have made me feel uncomfortable that I've seen this person do. And this is something that we have to think about. At the level that we are, does something make us feel yucky or does something make us feel good? In this context, this person's behavior makes me feel yucky. And that is something that I want to share with you because I care about you and I love you and I want you to be safe.
Just one little quick thing is I often ask kids when they seem to be interested in something like, what's it mean to be a boyfriend or a girlfriend? And I don't ask what it means to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. I mean what it means to be a boyfriend and girlfriend. Because you might get some information out of your kid about what they think that means, and then that will help frame up a bit about where they are in the process. Because we throw these words boyfriend and girlfriend around like it doesn't mean anything. And it does for some of our individuals, and to also know exactly where they are on that so that you know how to best address and begin the conversation about what does it mean to be a boyfriend. If they don't want to answer that question, then you can say, well, what does it mean to have a girlfriend or boyfriend? But it gives you two opportunities to try to start the conversation. One is more internal on your child answering about what they think it is for themselves, and then the other is more for them to be able to share with you on what they think it means to be in something like that.
And just one final resource because we are going to wrap up. If you haven't checked out meetups online, again, online can be powerful for good. There are meetups. There are social meetups for parents. There are social meetups for children. Those are monitored spaces. So if you haven't looked up meetups, there's all kinds of different topics that people are talking about. We can't guarantee those meetups will always be great and you'll come out of them feeling like you really want to use that resource, but it is a space because you're not alone. And there are people out there, and if you take a chance and it doesn't work out, maybe you wasted a tiny bit of time, but you might have also learned an important lesson. Thank you all.
I've learned a lot.